So thank you so much for all of your speeches. We've heard a couple of case examples, and then you've been working with a lot of companies. What do you think are the big propellers of this change now, of the design economy? And where could we have easy wins in general? Let's say that my thinking here is that if you would tell a company right now that we want you to use more resources, they would say, well, that's absurd, because nobody wants to go backwards and reverse. But instead, if you now tell them that, hey, we have ways for you to actually design your process in a new way, and they're like, aha, okay, now I get it, that we shouldn't be using more. But what do you think would be right now the kind of like stepping stones that this needs to be implemented in a larger scale? Sandra, yeah.
You're looking at me. Is this on? I don't know. I feel... Well, for me, it would be collaboration, because I don't know if you noticed, but well, that's probably due to organizing this together with the Dutch embassy. There's a lot of initiatives that are taking place in Finland now and in the Netherlands, and I guess there's comparable initiatives around the world as well. And we know that in order to create a system change, we need, at the bottom of a system change, all small initiatives that are, like a bug in a mosquito in your bed, just making it very difficult for the large companies to just keep doing what they are doing. And then from, top side, we need either legislation or we need societal pressure. And both are, coming along, but not very swift. But if we can strengthen the initiatives at the bottom, by collaborating and saying, hey, there is a solution, and then, the mosquito becomes bigger and more annoying to the multinationals, so to the main dominant system, and then it's also easier for politics to say, okay, we embrace this and we make sure that all complexity in the law or in rules, that we come up with new solutions. And then that's where change comes from.
Yeah, I can definitely adhere to some of that. I definitely think that we need the assistance of politicians. But I've noticed that there's as I mentioned, I do a lot of this, and there's a lot of talk. There's a lot of politicians that drive an agenda. But as a company and as a business, we just have to acknowledge that really doesn't drizzle down in for instance, public government. So one of the things that could be put on an agenda is public procurement. Simply just specifying we need circular this and that. That could be a major game changer, I think, getting public procurement, for instance. And then, of course, also, as you mentioned, just general information in society, because there is an end to this. We cannot uphold this kind of consumption for very long. Raw material prices will, as you were talking about, will rise at some point, and we also already see some of that in precious metals and stuff like that.
Is changing the minds really enough, or does it have to be the bottom line, the economical bottom line, that changes before change is made?
I can start on that. I think it can be a combination, and if you think about kind of in a cliche way that you understand your customers, and that's a big thing. So you understand, for example, that they don't really want light bulbs, but they want lighting. Or they don't need a fridge, but they want cold drinks, and from there you can kind of make that logic, and I think that could be even a kind of a quick win to get there.
Yeah. Petteri has.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the same a little bit. That quite often you have to in cooperation combine the short-term value and the long-term value, and I think that's challenging for the executives in most cases. Short-term value is pretty straightforward, dealing with the margin and so on. So that's pretty evident. But the long-term value is the more difficult thing. So I think maybe you would prove that you're on the right track with the short-term value goals, and trying to aim for the big ones in the future.
Yeah, right. Well, I think that all these comments are very valuable, and I think that we need these all dimensions. We need the politicians, we need the big thinking, and on the other hand, we need the companies, we need the entrepreneurial thinking, and we need risk taking. And I think that companies, of course, they are to bring revenue, so it has to be there. So there is money involved in these questions, but at the same time, if we think about these measurements, there has to be the big goal of reducing the overusage or the consumption. It's that's a fact. Otherwise, there will be no good future for any of us.
So we've been talking a lot about resources and economics and the circular economy, but what does design have to do with this? What does design bring to this whole picture?
Okay, I was called back from the subway station to answer the design questions. I think design has a lot to do with this. I've been working with Nokia for a long time and with massive volumes and massive product development teams, and I think design has a lot to do. Actually, it's not so often discussed, the role of design in here. I think one point is that you have to sort of, the business case in the company has to be such that you are aiming for long life cycles of products. It can be also pressured by the investors, so something can be pretty trendy and steep, usually go quickly up and you come down also quickly. Companies like Crocs or Hollister or fashion companies which are extremely trendy at the time. Well, they also got out of fashion pretty quickly. But I also think it's this kind of classical design language that the products are designed so that the materials, the design elements are such that they have a long life cycle. So I think that's really critical. But it's also the cooperation with the R&D teams. You're always optimizing and compromising different things and making options while you're developing something. So I think it has a lot to do. But it's not. It's very rarely that designer can decide the concept or the, let's say, fully the appearance. So it's always a combination.
And I think there's also room for a lot of service design. If we say the solution is in creating experiences and integrating products and services as a whole, then service design is key in that, isn't it? Can I ask a question to Outi? Because I'm so sorry, my Finnish is not up to standard. But from your presentation, I understood that you have a lot of customers and you are successful in selling this sustainable workwear. So what do you think is key in convincing these customers? You probably mentioned that in Finnish, but what is your elevator pitch that they say, okay, I'm going to buy from you and not from a regular workwear company?
That's a great question. I love that. Actually, it has a lot to do with design. So it's to us, the sustainability is a key value there, and it's a target. But on the other hand, the workwear has to be so much more. It has to be functional. It has to be good looking. It has to be something that's making your day better. So I think we have to convince on all these segments, and of course it's part of the service especially. So this is it's a one-to-one discussion always what we have, and it's depending on whom we are talking to. We hardly succeed if it's only about the price. Then it's not our case really. But it's not that we would be expensive, but it's the fact that that's not the key factor in our processes. It's about all the other aspects. And what we do a lot, which is making significance to our clients, I believe, is that we are helping them to communicate about this. And that's maybe one thing about the service design as well. The communication, you have to know what you are having, and you have to be able to deliver it easily to your employees and to your clients, and that's important.
Yeah.
Can I just quickly pick up on that? I think that's a great answer, and there is no single answer. As you know, you have to start from design, and I was talking about the kind of as a service thing a lot, and kind of an analogy on that side. If you think of it, it's not enough that you shift from selling shampoo to a monthly subscription model, and then you get the same shampoo and you pay a monthly fee. Who's interested? Nobody. But you have to have some kind of innovation or design or additional, maybe somebody's rubbing it to your hair while you're showering, I don't know. There has to be something more in it, and then it starts to make sense, and then you can make the whole shift. So it's not that simple.
So is it like, I'm just thinking that if there's this clash of this kind of like old business and this new business where there's this new economy, like that the kind of how we run our stock markets or something like this are not really sensitive to these other values that the whole design circular economy is bringing in. Is it going to be kind of like one or the other, or does the circular economy kind of like have to adapt to perhaps the old business norms, or how is that going to move forward? What's your predictions?
Well, I don't think it's either or, but you're actually pointing out a classical business dilemma, right? Should we go with what we know and we're making money, we're getting our bonuses and we're doing pretty good, or should we jump for this over here that's kind of uncertain and we don't know, we see it, but we know what we got. And that is a really tangible business dilemma, balancing that, changing your engine on your Boeing 747 while you're flying. Because you have investors, you have stakeholders, shareholders, of course, being that live off of your business. So that's really the core of that challenge, right? Yeah. To balancing that. Because I think, as I mentioned before, there's a lot of talk. Everybody sees this. Everybody can see, not everybody, but a lot of people can see the business opportunities out there. But something definitely needs to change. We're talking about stock markets and the traditional establishment there. Looking at financing. Turning things into services, that kind of requires some kind of financing, developing, designing new products and stuff. It's the whole financial setup, of providing finances is fundamentally based on the ownership of assets, and when you go into circular. You don't necessarily have assets that you can put up as security for lending money and stuff. The money and the business opportunity is actually in tapping into value streams down the line, closing the loop in the circular universe there. So basic stuff like getting financing for your projects, however good and promising, is an issue.
Well, at least sustainable finance is looking good. There's a lot of big banks that have promised hundreds of billions for it, but we'll see what that actually means in practice. But what kind of expertise is then needed to kind of take these companies to the next level? Because I don't believe that if you've done something for 30 years in the same way, you necessarily have this mindset or somehow to kind of like suddenly jump into something new. They might be both. Design and the circular economy might be completely new subjects to someone who's been working in it. Daniel, you've been wrestling with these maybe.
Yeah, a little bit. I think kind of the more non-academic answer is kind of passion and right people and a few sauna sessions or talks and it's practical stuff like that. It's the connections and people who can stand in the right place and convince a few more and make the movement. That's in practice, I think, how it goes. And there are many other angles. Maybe somebody else would like to pick on those.
On top of sauna sessions.
It's a great sauna here. I just was here yesterday.
Okay, yeah. Good. I think it's the key point is to understand that it's a big cultural change that you have to work persistently towards a goal. So I think in most cases where you have a long history, it's pretty much easier with startups where you don't have the history. But if you have a long history, you're prepared to work in a certain way. The business logic is pretty established. So it needs a long journey. It was nice that you mentioned the services because I think the design's biggest input is the customer experience, which is usually a combination of products and services. In older business, it was more emphasized on the product side. in the modern business, it emphasized more about the service side. So to simplify it.
Can I add something? Because one of the things, well, we just have a big debacle in the ING Bank this last weeks, and now also a debate on leadership. And that's why I mentioned it all goes back to understanding what your position is in the world. Not only as a company, because if you look at, there's multiple surveys, all brands that align the interests of all stakeholders, so not only the shareholders, but include the people living around the factory, that include the people working in the whole value chain, being it here in Finland, in the Netherlands, in Europe, or far away. If you align the interests of all the stakeholders, that it benefits. If you look at the old survey from Firms of Endearment, it says it's even ×9 bigger outcome than compared to the great companies. Philips has been an example of a company that by aligning the interests of all these stakeholders, that the company could grow so fast and become really a global player. So for me, it is understanding that you are not alone, but you need to do this together, and that we also need to have a debate on what does that mean for the leaders of the companies. What do we expect from them, and that we also address the issues in where we say, okay, we think here you're out of line.
Yeah, that's the also classical Patagonia example where they actually made everybody care about the product and the customer. But I know there's a couple of people from universities who are thinking of making circular economy or circular design courses. What would you say that needs to be taught for the future leaders who are coming out of these universities, and what kind of knowledge does there need to be, or like imagine what do they need in their bag to propel the businesses of tomorrow? Maybe you can. Daniel is nodding a lot, but Outi probably has a lot to say.
I'll go a quick one, and then you can go. I think one answer is that you should kind of embed circular economy and the larger thinking behind it to any kind of school of thought, and not have it a separate course. And kind of understand that is it then engineering studies or design or business or arts, there's always an angle to look at that in a more holistic way, and it's a very broad concept, and just to kind of understand, starting from the planetary boundaries to very practical things in product life cycles and materials. Yeah. So it kind of goes a bit of everywhere.
Yeah, Petteri.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that it's also pretty much a question about leadership, that somebody's leading the process. I think the know-how and the knowledge is one thing. People are aware about certain things, which I think is in most cases is on a pretty good level. But the problem is the leadership, that you are not, somebody should prioritize the goals. They should be in the annual planning of the business unit, whatever is the structure, and they should be followed and measured. Then you start to happen. Well, maybe I have been too long in the business, but I feel a little bit cynical that it would go voluntary. So it has to be led and it has to be followed and measured. So then it starts to happen. Of course, the general level of know-how has to be sort of improved as well. But in most cases, it's about leadership. I think it was Ann who mentioned the person who was somewhere in the marketing who was in charge of the things. And that's a typical example where it's not led. So not tangible things, goals in the business units, and they're followed and prioritized. Marja-Leena. She was the person, yeah. Okay.
I think this is a very complex world at the moment, because we all know that we should do something, and we have this urgency or the pressure that how can I solve it, and that demands, of course, very good networking. And I think that's something that everybody should be feeling the obligement to share some time and thoughts and meet people around these matters, and that of course includes the students and these new programs that are to be developed. But in a way, I think that the development of this holism or this enthusiasm, that's maybe most important. That's something you cannot learn by theories. It's something that maybe the courses should have something to do about being passionate and that's maybe combining these. Maybe there should be some other speakers in the schools than just speaking about academical points.
Yeah. What about really practically in your own work and in your own office? Do you have specific designers working in your team? Do you all have to have do you have a design day in the year, or how do you kind of refresh your own knowledge and keep it active in the team to kind of like design these processes better or use these things? Well, Petteri has it maybe easier, but how is it like really concretely implemented into your teams and into your regular days? Because we're talking so high level, sometimes it's hard to grasp what actually happens there.
Yeah.
So polite.
Well, the thing is, what we try to do, but it's not like a systematic approach on every Monday morning, is that we try to learn from every case that we work on. What steps did we take? What did we learn along the way? And how can we improve there and implement it in new cases or new projects? And that it has to do with having kind of like this learning approach in your system, but it's also good to be challenged by outsiders. Beware of your own assumptions there, and I think being here will help. So getting questions, helping you rethink the things that you preach, and I think we should do that more often in the office as well, colleagues.
That recapping and like looking at a project that when it's already done is really important, and I know that a lot of organizations lack that. But yeah, Outi.
Well, in our office we have actually every Friday we have one person who is collecting all the data that we get, like from internet, from our networks, and that's shared, so everybody can look when they have the suitable time to go through those informations. That's some part of learning. And of course we share a lot. We are a small company and we have a very intense working office, so the information is spread easily. But on the other hand, I think that we are very lucky because we have these companies who have found us and noticed us. From that point of view, I think that communications in media are very important too, because we are now getting a lot of responses and challenging from outside, and I think that's the major thing. You think that you know, but you don't really know, and that's how you learn all the time, every day.
How does Sitra teach itself about?
Okay, I'm saying...
Because you're the teacher, so now you need to answer.
I'm saying this at the risk of being profiled as the one who is making just light comments and jokes and not sticking to the real answers. But still, I'm a kind of a self-taught artist, and I like to draw and think about those things also. So what I do is I find time to draw, to think, and to talk with people who know better than me, and bring that like personally, very concretely to my work, and think about the customer. So that's my approach.
Yeah, well, maybe just a final comment on that. Our basic approach is no different than what you're talking about. It's a continuous process, which of course also is about innovation, but innovation is often thought of, bright ideas and 3 colored pens and a board. But actually innovation is can be a very, very structured process, and being a company of our size, it is more than you would imagine, a very, very structured process how we develop these products, returning back to the market. Okay, guys, we have this on the table now. We are thinking about these kind of features at this time plan. What do you think about that? And then it goes in a continuous cycle like that. So basically, same.
Customer iteration.
Yeah, but the process is the same. Scale is maybe a little different.
Just a few more notes. I think it's really vital that the vision is for the employees is significant and energizing. So I think the big picture is so the skis are pointing the same direction. I think that's crucial. And then I think it's really important to celebrate the small victories that you have on the journey. So and be curious. I think there was 3.
Before we take audience questions, tell me kind of like one thing that you're really excited about, a product or some kind of a methodology or something like that you've recently or not recently discovered or something like this. I mean, I can start. I love this company called Poptic. Maybe many of you know it. It's small. I don't know how small they are anymore, but they used to be a small startup from Otaniemi, and they're trying to replace plastic bags and doing interesting packaging materials from all sorts of woody biomass and stuff like that. And the other one, what was the other one? That just started collaboration with Stora Enso. This Sulapak, yeah, with Suvihaimi, yeah. Okay. But yeah, maybe something exciting.
Well, now you inspired me. In the canals of Amsterdam, there's this plastic whale, and that's for team events. And then you can fish the garbage out of the canals. And they actually make money out of that because
they can resell the bicycles.
And you really get greedy, you know. You go fishing, and then you have one PET bottle, and then you have something else, and then and you get greedy, and then we all, it's like it almost becomes a challenge. How much garbage can you pick out of the canals? Which of course is, well, that's a problem. But then you see that we can also make it fun. And other initiatives that we see is, we see a lot in sustainable clothing, because textile is an industry that we really need to clean up. And I also like iced tea made from saved fruit. So we're working with Thijs Tea, and they save this fruit because we are overproducing lemons, strawberries, well, everything. And then they say, okay, what's seasonal fruit, and how can we use this overproduction and make it into something that adds value?
Well, not that I drink a lot of beer, but just to tease my Dutch colleagues here that know Heineken, last week Carlsberg, the Danish brewery, launched a new kind of six-pack beer. They call it the Click Pack. They have basically just removed the plastic wrapping around every other six-pack or eight-pack or whatever, and put a dot of glue between the canisters. I was completely amazed by that. How mundane it might be, but the impact of that is just amazing, and it just goes to show when companies of a certain size decide to go down that road, how the impact can be. Because by changing that, they're going to reduce, I can't remember the number, but one number I can remember is the equivalent of 60 million plastic bags, the plastic usage of that. Just that thin wrapping around it. I think that's amazing, and talking about, changing things rapidly.
Yeah.
Just a little thing like that.
Yeah.
I know it's not a little thing, probably to do, but anyway.
I think I was also impressed on that. I think it was 76. I guess somebody knows it better in here, but the amount of plastic that they were able to reduce. But I think it's also really important that we look at how you can do it in big scale.
Yeah.
It's really nice to think about small companies with agile product development, but I think the big change is in the big companies. So I would like to see something really big happening in the fashion industry, that somebody would replace something that is not working properly at the moment. So that would be really impressive for me.
Well, continuous to that, I think it's, as an example, Infinity Fiber and Company, and of course Spinnova, and again about collaboration, Marimekko working with Spinnova, I think that's awesome. That's something that is going to change the customer thinking, and they have availability to do so. So I admire that.
Yeah. Quick comment from Daniel, and let's take a couple of questions.
Okay, I was thinking of startups that inspire me, but I'm going on other routes here. My passion is kind of, tapping into renewing the society and finding new cool things that have a chance to break. And I think it's really inspiring to see that in the last years, if you look at flea markets or internet sales of used things, or Facebook groups like Kallio ostaa myy, or the local things in your house and the area, there are crazy statistics of 500% rise and stuff like that in just past years. And I think we are on to something with that.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some great impacts around that theme, just to have that thought.
Also, Helsinki mobility has just changed entirely within the past 2 years. I don't need a car, I can rent them, I can borrow them, I can use whatever, and the last mile as well with the city bikes and everything. So it's kind of like really drastically changed. But we have time for a couple of questions, so let's see, are there any questions for the panelists here? Ia has one. Let me run with this one without a cord rather.
Thank you for all of the really nice speeches. There is this concept of citizen designer that is sort of becoming more and more existing. And what do you think of that? What kind of ideas does that provoke in you? Like, is it something that you think will have an influence in? So not just have a professional designer, but also treat every one of us as responsible in designing better future.
I take it. I guess it's like a big movement of participating in the sort of common well-being, and I think it's a good example of how you really make, let's say, people-driven solutions rather than, well, they're not customers, but I think it's a good way to understand that then people are really getting an influence on the environment in that case. But I think it's a good way. But I'm emphasizing maybe quite a lot of this leadership, but I think there always has to be some kind of leadership structure that makes the prioritizing and leads and follow-up and measurement and things like that. Otherwise, it's quite often you don't get tangible results.
Who else? Yeah.
Thank you. Tiina Kuusama, I'm an entrepreneur. I actually have several questions, but let's start with one. This is kind of a question/idea. If this exists, please someone tell me. If this doesn't, I think we need one. Is there some kind of network where companies could say that, hey, we produce this kind of garbage, or we produce this, we don't do anything with it, and other companies could search for, we need this kind of a material for our process. Because I've been searching for a material that I know somebody produces as a waste. I just don't know where I could source it.
Maybe we need brokers for waste soon, because resources are going to be so scarce. But yeah.
I think the kind of data banks and tries I've seen so far haven't been that good and not live kind of thing. I do have some friends in Russia who are doing this on top of a blockchain and for ores and metals and minerals and kind of a live system for that with big money and big plans and many other things. So I can keep you posted on that one.
It's also sometimes very shameful for the companies to actually admit how much waste they're making. So if you have a mega scale production and you're doing something like 500,000 tons of some sort of waste that's not very, like, let's say, media sexy at the moment, then you don't necessarily want to go and shout it out that you're producing something like that. But yeah, good idea.
I think that the experience has been so far that these have not been so well functioning yet. And I think it's of course because there is not a platform that's large enough. That's maybe one reason. Because then when somebody has collected materials and has been able to deliver that to others, but if you need you need red something and you get blue something from the library or whatever it's called, that's kind of a one block already, and then when you get disappointed, it doesn't work so easily. So it should be really, really a large scale of things to be offered, I think.
Could be some kind of a blockchain like marketplace where you wouldn't identify the seller, or some sort of trading system. Right, did we have one more question here? Yeah.
As a commentary to that, I have a database of 5,000 companies in Finland containing the waste streams and size streams from wherever. So just come and ask me and I can analyze.
This seemed like the right platform for it. Were there other questions still? A few. Did you have another one? Yeah. Okay.
Actually, how do you see the role of service companies, service sector in circular economy? Is it just end users, or how could they be part of the change? How can we make them participate in the change of using or not using so much resources?
That's a tough question. What kind of service sector you mean? I think the biggest service sector is healthcare in Finland.
Say if my company was making haircuts
Yeah,
instead of
like
shampoo.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a tough question, and especially if you go to the kind of entrepreneurs who are very in their daily business and maybe don't have so big growth plans or kind of renewal plans in that way, like how to speak their language in these kind of a bit sometimes high level concepts. I think that's a very tough question, and I'd like to hear the answer too.
Well, I don't know if I have that answer. I think they could also be ahead of the game, because then in procurement and sourcing, they could lead and say, okay, how can we, because we have a relationship with the end user, lead the game. I was thinking about, I don't know if you know this search engine Ecosia? Ecosia? Do I spell it right, or? Ecosia. Actually, so you could say we're all using Google. Well, the majority of the world is. And Google, of course, has to be energy sufficient and make sure that, they are more or less a green organization. But Ecosia, whenever you search anything, they plant back a tree. So that's a positive impact from a search engine. And I guess that's also how service companies can play a role. And I was inspired by the idea of it's not about EBIT or impact. It's a conjunct between these two. So one of the presentations on the Upright project, saying, okay, if we think about impact and EBIT go hand in hand, then you can come up with also from service companies with new solutions that benefit both financial streams, planet and social streams.
Yeah, my company, Carboculture as well, every ton of CO2 is profitable for us when it's sequestered in a safe way, and not because of government support or anything, but because people want to buy a product that they want to use. But yeah, Petteri had a comment.
Yeah, just thought that as the trend of sharing is going up and the trend of owning is going down, I think it's really necessary to invent the right customer experiences and services that are fulfilling the gap. You mentioned, for example, the cars. I think that's a good example that companies like OP, they have 90 designers mainly trying to explore the new service business possibilities of replacing something that is tangible product with the service.
All right, thank you very much. Let's give a round of applause to our speakers.